This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. Well, let's go to question number 39. There it is. Do children have the right to choose the members of the House of Representatives? No. Answer, no. Children are too young. Well, what is the age of accountability that should allow a man to enter into that process and choose who the House of his representative to the House of Representatives is? What does the Bible say is the age that makes a man fully accountable? The Bible's clear as crystal. 20 years old. 20 years old. 20 years old and upward. At that point, the male, according to the Bible, the male is fully responsible for his actions and will answer for them. He becomes a member of the militia. The militiaman has two duties at common law. And in Israel, it was the same thing. Defense of the land by force of arms if necessary, and defense of the law of the land as a member of the 12-man jury. That's it. And that, friends, with that, we would have government. We don't need much else. Men will take care of themselves otherwise. That's the government God has given us. Jury duty and national defense. That's the job of the militia, the people of the several states. And the age God gives us is 20. I've pointed out before, the reason at common law, the age is 21. At common law, the age is 21, has been in our country since the beginning. Until I was a grown man, it was 21. But the devil is very clever. He wanted children and women to rule over us. I'm quoting from Isaiah. It says, I think it says women and children to rule over us. And that's the judgment of God when that happens. An amendment was put into the Constitution back in 1972, somewhere back there, lowering the voting age, the age of minority, to 18. That's not what the Bible says. That's not what God says. God says 20. He takes it very serious, by the way. He killed exactly 603,548 militiamen of the several tribes of Israel in the wilderness during the 40 years that they wandered. It says in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament that their carcasses fell in the wilderness because God killed them. Why? Because they were all 20 years old and upward, and they had been murmurers, complainers against him, and refused to go into the land that he had deeded over them to them using the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is the land deed of that land, complete with metes and bounds description of boundaries. He killed them, 20 years old and upward. And during that 40 years, a new crop of men reached maturity that were born after the evil that militia, that set of militiamen had done. There were 2 militiamen that didn't die because they did not enter into the murmuring and complaining and refusal to go into the land that God had deeded over to them according to his trust settlement. That's what happened. 20. Well, why do we say 21 at common law? Why do we say that's the age of majority? Because we don't want to make a mistake. At common law, they said we don't want to make a mistake. We do not want somebody to lie to us, and if we don't know exactly when the man is born, or we miscalculate or miscount, or out of negligence, say this man is old enough to be fully responsible. And by the way, when you're fully responsible as a man, take it serious, man. God could snuff you out. You will answer. You will answer for whether or not you took up your responsibilities of government. Defense of the land by force of arms as a member of the militia of the several states, and defense of the law of the land of being willing to serve on the 12-man jury. That's your duty. Second Amendment says you have a right. That's a duty at common law. That's what that word means. Duties arise out of law. You have a duty to keep and carry a loaded gun. You have a duty to see to it that all. We went to the Bill of Rights. That's one of the courses of the 10 we've taught and we have in the can. You can go take that course on the Bill of Rights, what they mean, how they've applied. You have a duty. Well, we said 21 because we didn't want to make a mistake. At common law, the age of majority is 21. Just like if the Bible says 40 lashes at common law, we said for centuries, no, we're just going to do 39. Well, what if we miscount and add one and didn't notice? We don't want to go over what God says. I remember reading about Justice Fields, U.S. Supreme Court Justice. Before he was Lincoln appointed him to the Supreme Court, as a young man in his early 30s, he hightailed it from New England around the Horn and landed in California during the gold rush. He wanted to be where the excitement was, I guess. Well, he'd been a lawyer back in, I believe it was New York, and so he took up lawyering out there. Eventually, he ran for the state legislature, was defeated. Eventually was appointed to the Supreme Court of the state of California. Then beyond that, appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. And he makes the point that he ran for judge 8 days after he arrived in a town that is a town now, but it wasn't then, it was just a camp. He ran for judge. It was, the Americans hadn't taken over, and so the offices were still Spanish, law of the city, Roman law offices. One of them was alcalde. The alcalde combines the powers of a common law sheriff, the powers of the common law justice of the peace, the powers of the judge. Well, he's the man in charge in the local, we call it a county. They didn't. Alcalde, Spanish word. In the first case to come before him, he's judge. He's the executive branch. See, this is the way it is, the civil law. Executive branch, he's like the sheriff. He's the enforcer of the law. He's the judge. There is no jury in the law of the city, so he's the judge, the decider of the application of the law. He's all three branches of government. Well, but he was very much a Christian man. Matter of fact, his sister was a missionary to Islamic people in Asia Minor, Turkey. When he was a teenager, he went there, well, a long time ago, when he was 14 years old and lived with his sister. He was a Puritan family, then called Congregationalist. Well, they brought a man before him that had stolen gold dust. Well, that wasn't tolerated, of course. It's like cheating at cards. They just kill people for that. Or stealing a horse. They'd hang you for that. Stealing gold dust, couldn't tolerate that in a place like that where people, mining was all they were doing. There was no government, remember, no state legislature. They just got there and they had to organize locally, and he ran for that office, and this fellow was brought to him to be tried for stealing gold dust, and he was convicted. And then he was judge then, Fields said, Stephen, his name's Stephen, he said, now what do I do? What kind of a sentence do I give him? We don't have any legislation. I don't have any guidance from anybody else in government. So he took his Bible. They didn't even have a jail. Poor fellow was chained to a tree until they could try him. He took his Bible. He said, well, what does God say about these kind of things? Well, no jail to put him in. Can't jail him for what he did. His crime is not egregious enough to hang him or shoot him. Well, what does the Bible say? Well, it says, tie him to the post and lash him. Well, how many lashes do you give a man? Well, it says 40. That seems to be common in the Bible, so we'll give him 39 because that's what it says at common law. And then he said, well, the Bible says that when this happens, the judge who delivers the sentence, he has to watch, just in case the fella that's delivering the punishment gets out of hand, enjoys it too much, maybe gives him too many lashes. I've got to watch. So he went and watched. And I have learned by asking people in prison, if you had a choice between 39 lashes and a year in prison, which would you take? I've never had anybody ever hesitate to answer that question. I mean, they know right away. They say 39 lashes. Unless you've lost your liberty, friends, your liberty of bodily locomotion to be able to go where you want, when you want, you can't relate to these fellows and what they know. You lose your liberty, you know something you didn't know before. You don't just know about it. You don't know about losing your liberty. You didn't read about it. You know it. It's part of your experience. You only have three things in this life: life, liberty, and property. To lose any one of those three, to the extent you cannot enjoy any one of those three, you can't enjoy the other two. Can you enjoy your life in prison? Not like you can when you're out. Can you enjoy your liberty in prison? No, not like you can when you're not in prison. Can you enjoy your property in prison? No, you're not allowed to have that property in prison, and you're not allowed to manage it. And that goes for all of those three: life, liberty, and property. Yeah, all of them. They say the same thing. I'd take 39 lashes. A year in prison. No, it's not worth it. And it isn't. God is wise in his wisdom, and his judgments are measured. They're not brutal. I'll tell you what's really ugly is taking people's liberty and throwing them in prison. That's about the ugliest thing you can do. Who really suffers here? I'll tell you who suffers. Been around a lot of fellows like that. Their wives suffer more than they do, and their children suffer more than they do. But the evil empire likes that kind of thing. They want to bust up families. They don't want men to take responsibility and give restitution for their crimes if there was a crime. A lot of men in prison, there wasn't a crime. But in any case, this man that stole this gold dust, he should have been punished and then had to return value. And that's what happened. Are any other persons unfit to vote for U.S. representatives for the U.S. Congress? Yes. And how is it determined who may and who may not choose them? Listen, the word vote is a Latin word. It has to do with the Latin word volition, which means in English will, your want, what you desire, what you want. Will, volition. Like we say, voluntary is from that word. Voluntary, that's from volition. It means I have chosen myself to join and volunteer. But the English word, best English word for volition is for election, by the way, eklektos, a Greek word. The best English word is choose, out from among others. To choose out from among others. That's what election means. I choose this guy and not this guy. Election doesn't mean I just choose them all. The word's in the Bible, eklektos, a Greek word. We say election, the election of God's people. God chooses. Put it in English, he chooses this one, not that one. If you say he chooses everybody, that's not a choice at all. That is not what the word means. It means to choose out from among others, eklektos. The eclectic method means, that's a right use of the word, we talk about the eclectic method. That means to choose out from among others of like kind. Eclectic curriculums, we used to do that. We chose a little from this curriculum. Montana Dan did a piece on us about homeschooling. And they said they used a particular curriculum with their daughter. And Miss Montana Dan said, but my daughter, she's more eclectic. She chooses from many different curriculums. Not this one, but this one. Not that one, but this one over here. It means to choose out from among others. And when you choose somebody for U.S. Senate, you're choosing this one and not that one. By the laws of each state, it is determined who may and may not choose, who may and may not vote. Whoever is allowed to choose the members of the legislature of any state is also allowed by the Constitution of the United States to choose members of the House of Representatives of the United States. You see, it's a state question, a state law question. Some states allow one class of persons to choose, and other states allow a different class. Each state acts as it thinks best. This choice is called election. Election. The election in 2020, the presidential election, and one of the big issues that came up was that the federal courts and others in the general government of Washington, D.C. were dictating to the states what their election laws were. But the Constitution of the United States says the states, each state is sovereign and chooses who they're going to let vote and how they're going to run their elections. Paper ballot, machine, that shouldn't be allowed at all. It doesn't work. It puts control in the hands of a single will that will hijack our elective process. But that's a state question, and that's what he's saying here in Stansbury in his Catechism on the Constitution. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com.